Pay attention to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, because the explosion continues. We are on the verge of a new all-time high, both for Bitcoin and Ether, and things are getting out of control. We're seeing quite a lot of volatility. As we already warned, this was upward volatility, but it's true that there are starting to be some signs that in the short term we could get a little scared, just in the short term, as I said, before we really head toward all-time highs. We don't want to fall into any traps, so the best thing is to start taking a look, and as always, we'll begin with the economic calendar. And as for today, are there any macroeconomic news? Honestly, no. Today is a holiday in Japan, and that's about it. But tomorrow there are some really important data releases for the crypto market that could move the market a lot overall. We're talking about the core CPI, the monthly CPI, and the annual CPI, in other words, basically US inflation. It's expected, pay attention, that the monthly core CPI will go from 0.2 to 0.3, and that the annual CPI will go from 2.7 to 2.8, which is not good news. So keep an eye out to see how the market reacts to all this data. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, so in our afternoon video we'll talk about how this data came out and how the market is reacting to it. For now, be very careful, especially if you're involved in any short-term trades. The best thing to do at that time is to take some profits, wait, and see what kind of data comes out and how the data reacts to the market. Or how the market reacts to the data, sorry, I'm dyslexic. And from here on, basically, we'll see how it goes. So, well, since there's not much more to say about the economic calendar, let's talk about trading different. Currently, as you can see, Bitcoin has been liquidating a lot on the upside, and in fact, there are still a few more liquidations left above. You can see it, the area between $122,500 and up to the $123,000 zone. All these $500 in between here have been left to be liquidated. Could liquidate them now or wait a bit, okay? In the end, keep in mind that if Bitcoin starts to move sideways or drop in this area here, what's going to happen is that more liquidations will form above, and in the end, that will make the movement even clearer. Right now, we're basically in no man's land, okay? Because below, there's absolutely nothing. There really aren't any reasons to want to liquidate to the downside. But there is something else that happened over the weekend that tells us Bitcoin could actually drop $2,000 or $3,000. So, for now, the liquidation issue is above us, which means to trigger liquidations, the price would have to move upward. But like I said, that's not the only thing today, and remember that in the end, all these things we talk about, each one is just another indicator, and you can't rely solely on liquidations. And today, yes, the liquidations are clear, but there are other things telling you the opposite. So be careful, because there could be traps, and Bitcoin could basically fool a lot of people. Let's move straight to today's Bitcoin analysis. And well, as you can see here, what I've marked is what I wanted to talk to you about today, and that's the futures gap. You already know, and I tell you this a lot, on weekends, if Bitcoin moves, futures gaps are formed. And indeed, we have a futures gap created all the way up to, pay attention, the $117,000 zone. This means that if we want Bitcoin to close this futures gap, Bitcoin would have to drop more than $3,000 from the current price. Could that happen? Well, absolutely, as you know. And those of you who have been on the channel these past weeks, we've been talking for weeks about the $114,000 futures gap, the $114,000. People were saying, it's not going to close it anymore, but it ended up closing it. Most gaps get closed, the vast majority, except for breakaway gaps, which are a different thing, okay? That's already explained as well in the technical analysis and trading course. But this gap doesn't seem to be a breakaway gap, and for now, there's a good chance it will get closed. And this, as I said, is the opposite of what the liquidations are telling us. But the liquidations also aren't telling us that it has to go up right now, so we could easily drop down to $117,000, close that futures gap, create more liquidations above, and from there make a move upward. But right now, going long or aiming for all-time highs is a bit concerning, especially with those futures gaps from 119 down to 117. So be very careful with that. But anyway, having talked a bit about the topic, look at the daily chart, look at how the daily chart looks. Back in the 112,000 zone, everyone was extremely scared, you know? A real fear. We were right at Bitcoin's biggest support, at the strongest support, basically hitting bottom, right around the all-time high zone from May, hitting bottom in this resistance area that turned into support, and everyone was in a state of extreme fear. And look, when everyone is selling at a loss and is extremely afraid, that's when we open our cycle longs. And what happened with our cycle longs? Well, many of them already have more than 1,800% profit, which I've shared with you on Telegram and also in the latest videos. Today, I don't have the account open, But those positions are still open, and I'll show them in upcoming videos as well. So we have the cycle longs open. We have longs that have been open for quite a while. And look now is when people start saying like, Bitcoin is about to hit all-time highs now. Well, it makes sense for them to say that because, for example, today Bitcoin was just 0.77% away from its all-time high. It's right at the doorstep, okay? But as I said, we also have the gap below. And as I said, yes, we could go up to liquidate above, but if we liquidate above first, then we would have to go down to the gap. So the best thing that could happen for Bitcoin is that we don't break the all-time high just yet, that we stay right at the doorstep, and from that point we get a bit of a correction. After all, this has also gone up a lot and very quickly. It's gone up more than 9% in just about 9 days. So it would be perfect for Bitcoin to take a few days off, to just have a little correction, to drop to 117, for people to start thinking again that we're going to $100,000, and from that point push up again. But it needs some liquidity, it needs some strength. And it does have strength, but it needs a little more, it needs to give that scare. That's what I think is going to happen, all right? And with the indicators, look, we're not in overbought territory. It could keep going up. The MACD just crossed upward with a bullish divergence. Now, people are starting to notice that the MACD is bullish, but the thing is, you should have seen that the MACD was bullish at least 3 or 4 days ago. I mean, you have to get ahead of all those moves and anticipate those indicators. On top of that, there's the hidden bullish divergence we pointed out on the RSI, which we already marked on August 2nd. All these signs of bullish moves could be seen coming for quite a few days now. People think you're crazy when everyone else is scared. But hey, here you can see it. And now that everyone is getting greedy with the money, that's exactly when we could see a drop of $3,000 or $4,000, no problem. And that doesn't change the bullish target of eventually breaking the all-time high and heading to 140,000. As you already know, my next target for Bitcoin is 140. In fact, I think we're going to reach 140. The question is, are we going to break this all-time high today or tomorrow? Are we even going to break it this week? It's possible that we won't break the all-time high this week. We're right at the doorstep, and we'll probably stay at the doorstep for another week. And then, starting next week, when people are a little less greedy, that's when you'll break the all-time high, okay? Just a bit of what you need to understand is what could happen, right? 4-hour chart, look, overbought on the RSI, the futures gap below. The futures gap is also right at the 200-period moving average, and the MACD has already been losing bullish momentum for 3 4-hour candles. The normal thing would be for Bitcoin to keep falling, okay? And it should keep falling quite a bit, all the way down to the 117,000 zone, okay? So, for now, we could simply be forming or starting to form a kind of downward channel, a sort of bull flag. After a big rally, a bit of a downward channel to 117,000, you close the futures gap, people get scared, and then it goes back up. Basically, that's what you could expect. Like I said, we could try going up first, but that would be worse because after making an attempt upward, we have to come back down. The best thing for Bitcoin would be to go down first and then make a move upward. That would be the best thing that could happen. And on the 1-hour chart for Bitcoin, well, you can see how we've had a significant drop from $122,300 down to $119,300. That's quite a few dollars down, right? That's a $3,000 drop, and we need another $3,000. After the big drop, we're seeing a pattern of, well, it's already 4 bullish candles, but they're not 4 huge candles that would make you say this is really bouncing back. To me, it's just catching a bit of breath before dropping again. Okay? I think the next drop should take Bitcoin down to the 118,000, 117,500 zone to start closing that gap. And that should happen within the next 24 hours. Okay? So, well, here we have a bit of what's happening with Bitcoin. I think it's interesting that today we also take a look at Ether. So let's go straight to today's altcoin analysis. So what's going on with Ether? Well, people must be freaking out, right? Today we've already started with the Alt Season 2025 videos, which are the cycle analyses, doing updates, and we've started with Ether. And I really recommend you watch that video because we talk about the weekly chart and the levels Ether could reach in the coming months. So I really recommend it. I'll leave the playlist in the description where we'll be releasing a new video every day. You already know that around noon we'll upload one of these videos. Tomorrow it's Ripple's turn, for those who aren't aware. Okay? So what's going on with Ether? Check out what's happened with Ether over the past few weeks. In April 2025, Ether was at $1,400. Okay? And now we're at $4,300, It's gone up 210% in about 120 days, in about 3 or 4 months. That's insane. And in fact, Ether right now is surpassing the all-time highs from December 2024 and March 2024, and it's practically at the all-time high from November 2021. I'll say it again, it's been 4 years since we've seen Ether as expensive as it is now. But there are people who are already saying they're going to get out of Ether, and I really recommend you watch the cycle analysis so you can see that this is just the beginning, and that really, when Ether surpasses the $4,800 zone, which is the previous all-time high, that's when the real strong bullish movement of Ether begins, the final phase of the bull run that's coming in the next few months. So, keep an eye on what happens over the next few days, because right now, after breaking through $4,100, Ether is very bullish, and it's been 4 years, I repeat, since it's been this bullish. But anyway, I think just like Bitcoin should drop to $217, or it would be really good for it to drop to $217, it would also be good for Ether to move sideways for a bit. Why? Because it has gone up a lot and very quickly. It has major bearish divergences on the 4-hour chart, and basically I would expect that at this point we stay, well, basically neutral and sideways between the $4,800 and $4,100 range. That we stay here for a bit, at least maybe for a week or so, and that from this point on we start the next upward move. What I don't expect is for Ether to just keep going up and up without stopping. So, well, that's kind of where we are, right? We even have a bearish divergence as well on the MACD RSI, and well, we have a bullish crossover on the MACD in positive territory. You know what that usually means, some traps. So, be careful with Ether's drops, especially if there are declines that stay above 4,100, or more importantly, above 3,900. That would be the last important support to hold, 3,900. As long as we're above 3,900, it's just a sideways movement before making the next upward move later on. Just showing a lot of strength, and well, that's very interesting to keep in mind. Take a look, for example, at how it looks on the 4-hour chart. There's one bearish divergence, two bearish divergences, because clearly here it goes up and here it keeps going up. So we have a lot of bearish divergences. The MACD is also crossed to the downside. It doesn't have much downward strength, but it is crossed to the downside. Can't go up like this, it can't keep rising like this. Sooner or later, and the later it happens, the worse it is. Okay, the longer it takes to correct, basically what we're going to get is a stronger drop. So what would be best for Ether at this point is to move sideways, to waste some time here. Waste time here for about a week or 4 or 5 days, and from that point on, once the MACD is reset, the RSI is reset, and we're ready, then we can go up. But right now, as things stand, this can't go to all-time highs. It's very similar to Bitcoin, okay? We're right at the doorstep of the all-time high. We're right here, look, okay? Ether is about 10%, 11% away from its all-time high. Let me remind you, just 4 months ago, right? Or even look at this since August 3rd. Okay, on August 3rd, we were more than 40% away from the all-time highs. Or basically that, right? In April, we were, really far from the all-time high, okay? In April, just 4 months ago, we were 240-something% away from the all-time high. Now we're only 10% away. We're right at the doorstep. But the question we should all be asking is this the move that's going to take us to all-time highs? Or do we have to wait for the next move? I think we need to wait for the correction. When the correction comes, we jump in, and that's when we'll hit all-time highs and beyond. Because if you look at the Ether cycle analysis, you'll realize the levels waiting for us even higher up, okay? So on the 4-hour chart, it's not the time to go long. How does it look on the 1-hour chart? Look, one bearish divergence, two bearish divergences, it drops a little, but not much. And then one more, two more, even a third bearish divergence. That's almost 5 bearish divergences in a row. So why are there so many bearish divergences, but the price isn't dropping? Because of FOMO. Because of FOMO. People keep buying, and as long as people keep buying, this isn't going to fall. But there will come a point when everyone is in long positions and it's easy to liquidate people, and then a cascade of liquidations happens and the price drops quickly. So, in bull markets, this kind of thing happens a lot, okay? You can't look for shorts in these kinds of assets because you'll end up getting liquidated, since this just keeps going up and up and up. And when you finally decide to go long, you're the last one to join in and you get liquidated too with that big drop. So, it's really just about waiting for that moment when the drop happens, when all those longs get liquidated. If everyone is in long positions and most people lose money, guess what's going to happen? There's going to be a drop sooner or later. When that drop happens, you wait for it, the drop comes, and then you buy. Basically, you go long a cycle long. You trade however you see fit, okay? But chasing the short here is what's dangerous, and it's something a lot of people need to change their mindset about. It was hard for me too, and during my first cycle, when I saw Bitcoin break above the $3,000 zone, I kept shorting because we had spent a year shorting in a bear market. And you have to change your mindset. We're in a bull market now. You can't go chasing shorts every day, every hour, just because, look, there's a new divergence on the 5-minute chart, blah, blah, blah. You just can't do that. You can't, because you end up losing money, okay? So, well, that's kind of where we stand. Today, I'm not going to show the video because, well, I haven't been trading today. I've been doing other things. So let's go straight to today's video recap. And as I said, it's important to keep in mind that even though we're on the verge of an all-time high, it's true that we still need, I think, a bit of a correction. Bitcoin needs to close the gap, Ether needs to take a breather, and then after 3 days, maybe a week, we'll see the next bullish move that will take us toward new all-time highs. So that's it. Just be very careful with the market moves, don't get liquidated, and simply stay tuned for tomorrow's new cycle analysis, in this case for Ripple, and in the afternoon, as always at this time, a new Bitcoin analysis. So subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you tomorrow with more. See you soon, everyone. Bye-bye.